5 years ago, at our graduation, my parents gifted my twin sister Amelia a stunning lakefront villa on Lake Travis, surrounded by applause and admiration. And me? A cracked, barren piece of land and a cold joke to go with it. You can sleep under the stars. They laughed. I didn't. Back then, I had no idea what I would do next, only that the pain cut deeper than any metal I had ever welded. But now, I've turned that humiliation into the foundation of my own small empire. My name is Ava Carter. And if it were you, what would you do when your own family made you their punchline? Tell me, where are you watching this story from before we dive deeper into it? Thank you so much for being here right now. Amelia and I were born on the same day, just 4 minutes apart, yet all through childhood, it felt like the distance between us spanned a lifetime. We shared the same last name, the same face that strangers could barely tell apart, but inside our house, no one ever confused us. They always knew who was the child to be proud of, and who was the one who still had to do better. Amelia was the golden twin, the bright, radiant one who loved to perform and always knew how to say what adults wanted to hear. She had a sweet smile, a voice soft as honey, and a natural way of making every room revolve around her. As for me, I preferred sitting in the garage with my grandfather, taking apart old radios, soldering wires, and listening to the faint crackle of melting metal. Grandpa always said, "Ava, you don't have to be loud to shine. You just need to create something no one can ignore." I believed him. But my parents didn't. I still remember it vividly, our 12th birthday. The whole family threw a party in the backyard, with balloons, cake, and all of Amelia's friends, girls with curly hair, floral dresses, and voices chirping like sparrows. I stood off to the side, my hands still greasy from fixing my bike. When it was time for presents, my parents rolled out a gleaming white piano. "For you, Amelia," Dad said. "You need an instrument worthy of your talent." Everyone clapped. I watched, barely daring to breathe. Then Mom turned to me, smiling lightly. "And you, Ava, Grandpa has something for you." He stepped forward, holding a small wooden box. Inside was an old set of electrical repair tools, worn and faded. I smiled, not because it was big or shiny, but because I knew it came from the heart. Mom didn't see it that way. She looked at the scene as if Grandpa had just handed me a box of junk. "Like grandfather, like granddaughter," she muttered, and laughter rippled through the crowd. From that day on, I learned the art of silence. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I realized that in this house, my voice would never be heard. The older Amelia grew, the more beautiful she became, and the better she got at using her charm to be loved. Whenever relatives came to visit, Mom always called Amelia down first. "Smile, sweetheart, so they can see how different the twins really are." And when I finally walked in, still wearing a paint-stained shirt, she would fix a strand of my hair and sigh softly. "Ava, maybe try to be a little more feminine." I would just answer, "I'm fine the way I am." But deep down, I knew my version of fine would never be enough for them. In high school, the gap between us grew even clearer. Amelia played in the school band, ran for homecoming queen, and appeared in the local newspaper. I won the science fair with a homemade engine prototype, but when I brought it home, Dad only said, "Are you really planning to work with machines your whole life? A girl should study something more refined." I stayed quiet. After dinner that night, I went down to the garage, turned on the light, and started taking apart a new radio to teach myself how it worked. As rain drummed against the tin roof, I made a silent promise. One day, I'd make him say my name without that sigh in his voice. Grandpa was the only one who never compared us. He often told stories from his younger days. "People only appreciate what's easy to see, Ava," he'd say. "But real value often hides in what no one bothers to notice." When I once asked why Mom never smiled at me the way she did at Amelia, he simply replied, "It's not that you're not good enough, you're just different. And people fear what's different." I carried those words with me for years. One summer evening, I overheard Mom talking to our neighbor through the fence. "They're twins," she said, "but Amelia is what every mother dreams of." I froze behind the lavender bushes. That night, I climbed onto the rooftop and looked down at the glowing garden below, where Amelia was playing the piano for her friends. Tilting my head toward the sky, for the first time, I wondered if maybe I really was the unwanted child. But then I remembered Grandpa's voice. You don't need their approval, Ava. You just need to know you're walking the right path. In our senior year, Amelia got a brand new Mini Cooper from our parents. I was still riding the old bike I'd repainted myself, its wheels clattering every morning. My friends laughed, and Amelia shook her head. You're like the background character in a teen movie, she said. I didn't reply. Some words carve themselves into your heart, whether you want them to or not. When Grandpa passed away, I was the only one by his bedside. He held my hand and whispered, Ava, keep building. One day, the world will need hands that know how to mend. I didn't fully understand what he meant then, but I knew he wasn't just talking about machines. He was talking about me, about rebuilding a life, piece by piece. After the funeral, I came home to find Amelia live streaming from the living room, showing off the bouquet she'd received to honor our beloved grandfather. I quietly placed Grandpa's old wrench on the altar and said nothing. That same day, my parents began discussing our futures. Amelia will study marketing at NYU. Dad said proudly. And you, Ava, maybe one of those local tech schools would suit you better? I nodded. No argument, no complaint. I was used to it. But deep inside, a small seed began to grow, a seed of silent independence. From then on, I spent more time in the garage, learning welding, cutting, and basic programming. Late at night, when the whole house was asleep, I'd keep the light on and work, the hum of drills and the rhythm of hammering becoming my own kind of music. I knew no one would ever applaud what I was doing. But I didn't need applause. I just needed to become good enough that one day, when they spoke my name, they would hesitate before comparing me again. That was my childhood, a long stretch of silence, endurance, and small cracks I learned to hide. Amelia was the spotlight. I was the one quietly fixing the bulbs that made that stage shine. And from that darkness, I learned something no one ever taught me: how to stand tall without needing anyone to light the way. That morning, the Austin sky was so blue it almost hurt to look at. I stood among thousands of students at the University of Texas commencement ceremony, holding my mechanical engineering diploma, sweat running down my back beneath the heavy gown. Amelia, in her bright red dress, walked a few steps ahead. Cameras followed her, flashes flickering like a swarm of fireflies. No one called my name, no one asked how I felt. But inside, I was warm because I had finished something I built entirely on my own. No help, no shortcuts, just persistence. When I turned toward the audience, scanning the crowd for my parents, I saw them waving not at me, but at Amelia. The graduation party was held at a rented villa in Lakeway to celebrate both daughters' achievements. The moment I walked in, I knew the party wasn't for me. On the wall hung a huge photo of Amelia in her cap and gown, smiling between our parents, with gold letters above. Congratulations to our star Ava Carter. My name was printed in tiny letters in the bottom corner, as if added just to complete the twin set. Amelia was surrounded by bouquets and laughter, while Mom beamed with pride. My daughter graduated top of her class and already got accepted into the MBA program in Boston, she said loudly, making sure everyone heard. I stood by the table, holding a glass of water, forcing a polite smile. My uncle came over, patted my shoulder gently, and asked, Ava, are you doing okay? I replied, yes, I'm fine. The same answer I'd been rehearsing my whole life. Then came the moment for gifts. The whole room fell silent as Dad took the microphone. Today, he began, is a special day. Both of my daughters have grown into strong, capable women, and as everyone here knows, we've always believed in rewarding effort. I saw Amelia tilt her head slightly, her eyes lighting up. Dad continued. For Amelia, the daughter who has brought honor to our family through her hard work and determination, we have a gift worthy of her achievements. Applause erupted as he handed her a small silver key. Mom hugged her tightly, beaming. The lakefront villa on Lake Travis is officially yours, she announced. Amelia burst into tears, wrapped her arms around them, then held the key high like she had just won an Oscar. The room filled with cheers, clapping, and camera flashes. I stood still. No one noticed that my hands were trembling. Inside, a cold wave slowly rose through me. I thought maybe I'd still get a small gift, nothing extravagant, maybe an old car or a little help to get started with work. When the noise finally quieted, Dad turned toward me. He smiled, but there was something in that smile that felt more like duty than affection. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a white envelope, and placed it in my hand. "And you, Ava, you've always said you love building things, creating something of your own, so we prepared a piece of land for you." I opened the envelope and pulled out a property deed for an old parking lot on South Lamar, the same abandoned space I'd seen with a "for lease" sign hanging for years. I looked up. This is the abandoned parking lot, isn't it?" Dad chuckled. "Well, you wanted to start from the ground up. Consider it your chance to build something from zero. After all, sleeping under the stars is a great place to think." The room erupted in laughter. Amelia covered her mouth, trying to stifle her giggles. "Perfect. If you don't have a place to stay, you can sleep there under the stars. Sounds kind of poetic, doesn't it?" My parents laughed too, softly, as if it were just a harmless joke. But to me, it landed like a small stone dropped into deep water, rippling through everything inside me. I smiled, forcing my lips not to tremble. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That's meaningful." Mom nodded, her voice cool and detached. "We just want you to learn to stand on your own 2 feet." I replied, "I always have." But my words dissolved into the air, unheard by anyone. When the party ended, Amelia was surrounded by people taking pictures of her holding the villa key, while I stepped out onto the balcony. The wind from Lake Travis swept in, carrying the cold scent of water and the soft sound of waves against the shore. Below, the city lights shimmered like a band of artificial stars. I wondered if anyone in that room had ever thought about what it felt like to stand outside the joy of your own family. Probably not. I left the party early. No one noticed. That night, I drove to the plot of land on South Lamar. It was an old parking lot, about the size of 2 small houses, overgrown with weeds, the painted lines nearly faded away. The streetlights cast a weak yellow glow on the cracked asphalt. I turned off the engine, stepped out, and felt my shoes sink slightly into the sand and dust. The air smelled of asphalt and grit, the scent I'd known since the garage days. I stood in the middle of that empty lot, alone, listening to the hum of insects and the distant rush of traffic. I bent down, picked up a small stone, rolled it between my fingers, and whispered, so quietly only I could hear, "One day, I'll make them swallow every word." I don't remember if I cried, maybe I did, but if I did, the tears fell silently just like every other time before. Since I was a child, I'd learned that silence was sometimes the only way to survive in a family loud with bias. But this time, the silence wasn't for survival, it was for preparation. Because when they humiliated me one more time, I made a decision. This time, I wouldn't just survive, I would win. 3 years after that graduation, my life was simple and quiet, so quiet that sometimes I had to remind myself I was still moving forward. I worked as a mechanical engineer at a small workshop on the outskirts of Austin. It wasn't glamorous, and it didn't come with prestige, but it paid the bills, and I paid them myself. Every morning, I woke up at 6, brewed a cheap cup of coffee, and drove my old Honda Civic to the shop, where the smell of oil and the hum of machinery had become part of my heartbeat. I came home after dark to a ground-floor apartment with peeling paint and a ceiling that creaked whenever the upstairs neighbor moved. Back then, I thought I was at the lowest point of my life, but, in truth, that was the foundation. I didn't know yet that those small, unremarkable days were shaping the persistence I would later need to stand firm. Meanwhile, Amelia, my twin sister, seemed to be living in an entirely different movie. She married Daniel Ross, a young tech CEO in Dallas, and became the picture-perfect ideal woman on Instagram. Every few weeks, Mom would text me a link to another article. "Look at your sister," she'd say. Texas Business just featured her. Every photo looked the same: Amelia in a white dress, standing in the Lake Travis villa, holding a glass of champagne with a caption that read, "Work hard, stay humble." I would just smile faintly. For Amelia, work hard probably meant choosing the right dress for her next brunch. Family gatherings gradually became the thing I dreaded most. Mom always started the same way. "My youngest just opened another side company. Daniel says she's really talented." Then she'd turn to me, smiling faintly but with that sharp tone underneath. "And you, Ava, how's work at the shop? Still, fixing cars?" Dad would add, "If you knew how to seize opportunities like your sister does, things might look a little different by now." I stayed silent, finishing the last bite of dry bread on my plate. There were moments I wanted to scream that doing manual work didn't make me worth any less, that I was independent, that I hadn't taken a single dollar from them. But I knew saying it wouldn't matter. They weren't looking for understanding, they just wanted another excuse to be proud of her. After every gathering like that, I'd drive to the old plot of land on South Lamar. At first, I didn't even know why I kept going. Maybe because, empty as it was still the only thing that truly belonged to me. Every weekend, I'd clear weeds, sweep leaves, repaint the rotten fence. Sometimes I'd just sit in my car for hours, watching the sun sink behind the distant buildings. Each time I saw the rusted sign that read, "Carter Property," I'd remember that graduation night and the words, "You can sleep under the stars." I imagined replacing the sign someday with one that read, "The Lot by Ava." I didn't yet know what the lot would become, but I knew it wouldn't stay meaningless forever. My life was steady, but lonely. My college friends had all scattered, each chasing their own version of success. I dated a coworker once, Jake, a good man, genuine and kind. But I couldn't let him in. Every time he said, "You're amazing, Ava," I heard my mother's voice in my head. Amazing? If you were amazing, you wouldn't be living like this. Eventually, I ended it. I told him I needed to focus on my career, but the truth was simpler. I was just afraid someone might see the cracks in me, the ones I still hadn't learned to face myself. I still sent birthday cards to my parents every year, still called to check in out of politeness, and always got the same response. "Ava, you need to try harder, look at your sister and learn from her." Occasionally, Amelia would text me short, detached messages like, "Hey, you doing okay? I'm swamped this week, have to fly to New York for an event." I'd reply, "I'm fine. Take care," and then delete the chat right after. One autumn evening, coming home from the shop, I saw a new message in our family group chat. Mom had sent a photo of Amelia and Daniel standing in front of their newly renovated villa, with the caption, "So proud of our family." I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting off the damp walls of my apartment, and I laughed. Not out of sadness, but because I realized I didn't feel hurt anymore, I just felt distant. My family had become a play I used to perform in a story where I was the background character. And now, I had stepped off the stage. Still, something strange happened. No matter how busy or tired I was, I kept returning to that old lot every Sunday. Once, an old man who sold tacos nearby asked, "What are you planning to do with this place, miss?" I simply said, "I don't know yet, but I'm getting ready." He smiled, squinting at the setting Sunday. Preparation is the first step to something great. That day, for the first time, a faint sense of belief returned to me. I started reading about small-scale urban planning, studying local zoning laws, and teaching myself basic site design. I had no money, no clear plan, but I had a thought that refused to go away. If they thought I was only worth a parking lot, I would turn it into something they'd envy. Sometimes, when I stood in the middle of that lot, I could still hear the laughter from that graduation night, the sound of Amelia's voice, the condescending look in my mother's eyes. I didn't hate them, but I never forgot. Hatred keeps you stuck. Memory, though, that's fuel. And in that silence, I began to ignite the first spark of my dream. That afternoon, the Austin heat was so intense it felt like the asphalt itself was melting beneath my feet. I had just finished my shift at the workshop and planned to stop by a small cafe downtown to rest, but I got caught in traffic at a busy intersection. Ahead, something unusual was happening. A crowd gathered around a long row of food trucks stretching down the block. The smell of tacos, grilled meat, and roasted coffee mixed in the air, thick and warm. From a corner, the sound of soft acoustic music floated through the noise. Groups of friends laughed, children chased each other around picnic tables, and for a moment, time seemed to pause. There was something raw, vibrant, alive in that atmosphere. It made my heart race. I didn't know why, but suddenly the image of my own lot flashed in my mind, the abandoned parking lot on South Lamar. And for the first time, it didn't look dead. In my head, I saw string lights draped along the fence, soft music playing, wooden tables, food trucks lined side by side, and people gathered eating, talking, living. The idea struck so hard I had to pull over. I grabbed my notebook and scribbled fast. The lot, outdoor food park. That night, back in my tiny apartment, I opened my old laptop and started researching everything. Business permits, food safety codes, layout design, startup costs. The more I read, the more alive I felt. It was all difficult, but none of it was impossible. I texted Nina, a college friend who is now a junior attorney at a firm in Austin. "I have a crazy idea," I wrote. "If I turned an abandoned parking lot into a food park, how many permits would I need?" She replied 10 minutes later. "A lot. But crazy doesn't mean impossible. Meet me tomorrow morning." The next morning, I met Nina at a cafe, holding a stack of papers in my arms. She listened carefully, then smiled. "You're still the Ava I remember, quiet, but you actually do things. All right, I'll help. But when this works out, I want a table with my name on it right in the middle of that park." We both laughed. I couldn't afford a real attorney, but Nina guided me step by step, applying for business permits, food safety certifications, signing a long-term lease for the property. She even helped me prepare a small business loan application. But instead of going through a bank, the person who lent me the money was my boss at the workshop. He said, "I don't know what this girl plans to do with an old parking lot, but I know she's got something most people don't: patience." I promised to pay him back within 6 months, with 0 interest. From that day on, my life changed. By day, I still worked at the shop. By night, I went straight to the lot. I started by cutting grass, clearing trash, fixing the fence. I bought old paint, cheap brushes, and strings of lights online. Each time I flipped the switch to test them, the flickering glow in the darkness felt like reigniting a small part of me that had once gone dim. Some nights I was exhausted to the bone, yet I still sat in the middle of that space, looking up at the sky, thinking about the promise I'd made to myself. One day, they'll see that what they threw away could shine. Once the fence was up, I began reaching out to local food truck owners. Most were immigrants or young dreamers like me, people with big visions but nowhere to put them. I drove all over Austin, tasting their food and listening to their stories. A Mexican couple who made tacos, an elderly Korean woman who cooked spicy noodles, a young black man who roasted coffee by hand. I told them about the lot, an open-air food park where people could eat, listen to music, and feel free. They smiled, half skeptical, half intrigued, but eventually nodded. "If you're brave enough to try," they said, "then we're brave enough to follow." 3 months later, the empty lot began to transform. I hired a crew to install electricity, repave the ground, build dining areas, and string lights along the fence. Every night, while the city slept, I stayed there painting posts, assembling tables, putting up a makeshift wooden sign that read, "The Lot by Ava." Sometimes, people passing by would stop and ask, "What are you building here?" I'd just smile and say, "Something small." But it won't stay small for long. On opening day, I didn't expect much. But when the first food trucks opened their windows, people began to come: neighbors, workers, students. Laughter filled the air, music played through an old speaker I had repaired myself, and the smell of food drifted through the neighborhood. I stood in the corner, coffee in hand, my eyes stinging. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like someone's faded reflection. I didn't need anyone else's light, I had made my own. That night, after closing, I sat alone among the wooden tables. Above me, the stars shimmered just like the cruel words that had once cut so deep. You can sleep under the stars. I looked up at that same sky and smiled softly. All right, I whispered. But not to sleep, to dream. I would turn what they called a worthless lot into a place people sought out every weekend, and in doing so, I would find myself again. 2 years after hanging that first wooden sign, the lot by Ava was no longer an abandoned parking lot. It had become the beating heart of South Lamar, a place where weekend nights glowed with golden light, where the sound of guitars mixed with the scent of barbecue and laughter that carried down the street. The local newspaper ran a headline: "The woman who turned an abandoned lot into Austin's most beloved food park." TikTok flooded with clips showing the warm, twinkling space strings of lights, long wooden tables, kids running around, and me still behind the counter, still wearing gloves, still holding a wrench. People called me viral, but I just thought, maybe light does find those who were once left in the dark as long as they never stop flipping the switch. I used my first profits to buy 2 adjoining plots of land, expanding the food park into a full complex with a small live music stage, a beer garden, and a weekend market for local artisans. The Friday night acoustic sessions became a tradition. Every week, hundreds of people gathered to listen to music, drink craft beer, and eat sizzling tacos under the lights. I didn't have a villa, but I had something far better: a community built with my own 2 hands. Word spread faster than I ever could have imagined. I didn't post much, didn't need to brag. But one Saturday afternoon, while I was checking inventory for the beer garden, a white Porsche pulled up at the gate. The door opened, and a pair of red high heels hit the pavement first. I didn't need to look closely to know who it was. Amelia, blonde hair, silk dress, oversized sunglasses, a brand new Chanel bag on her arm. She walked through the entrance like it was a runway, while I stood among the food stalls and the smoke of grilled meat, wiping my hands on my apron. "Hey, sis," Amelia said, her voice sugar, sweet but hollow. "I just had to come see this little project of yours that everyone keeps talking about. It's cute." Her eyes scanned the place, the wooden tables, the long lines of customers waiting for food, then stopped at my muddy shoes. "Wow, you're still doing the whole hands-on thing?" I looked at her and smiled faintly. "Yeah, around here, we don't show off brands, only effort." My tone was calm, almost gentle, but it was enough to freeze her smile for a second. She blinked, masking the pause by pulling out her phone and lifting her Chanel bag for a selfie. "Anyway," she said lightly, "congratulations, I'm glad you found something that suits you." The word "something that suits you" sounded like a compliment, but the tone was a quiet cut. I just nodded, saying nothing. She left in a cloud of expensive perfume, her heels clicking against the pavement, leaving me standing in the middle of laughter and music. If this had been a few years ago, maybe I would have felt a sharp sting in my chest. But now, all I felt was peace. I was too busy building my life to care about their approval anymore. That night, after the music ended, I got a message from my mother. "Amelia said your food park was really crowded." "That's good, we're proud of you. But how much money are you actually making from it?" I looked at the message and leaned against the railing, watching the golden lights shimmer across the lot. How much money? I never counted. All I knew was that every dollar was earned through sweat, through nights I worked myself to exhaustion, through the faith of strangers who believed in a dream with me. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the old notebook, the same one where I had once written, "The lot, a place to stand." Beneath it, I wrote a new line, my pen steady and firm, "and a place where I'll never bow again." After Amelia's visit, I began to sense something else carried on the wind, the scent of envy. She started posting subtle captions online. "Success is when you no longer have to work with your hands." Beneath the post, my mother commented, "So proud of you, sweetheart." I saw it and just smiled. People can take pictures with anything, but no one can take a picture with real worth. A week later, Dad called. "Ava," his voice was strangely warm, almost unfamiliar. "Your mother and I are thinking of visiting your place this weekend. Anything special on the menu? I knew he wasn't coming for the food. There was something new in his tone, curiosity, mixed with a hint of regret. They were starting to wonder how much I had really built. Maybe, to them, success only counted if it could be measured in dollars. But for me, the meaning of value had already changed. I no longer needed them to define it for me. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I stayed behind, sitting quietly as the golden lights reflected off the pavement, the same ground that, just 2 years earlier, had been overgrown with weeds. I whispered to myself, if these lights make them finally look back, then so be it. I don't need their love, I just need them to know I'm no longer the one to be laughed at. In that moment, I understood something. The lot wasn't just a food park. It was my answer to all the years of being underestimated. Every glowing bulb, every strand of light strung across the fence, was proof that I had survived every insult and not just survived, but thrived. Yet, deep down, I knew my family wouldn't stay silent for long once they saw what I'd built. One early summer morning, the sunlight poured over the lot like honey. I was signing a contract with a local band for our upcoming holiday events when I heard a voice behind me. Oh, it's actually cuter than I expected. I turned around. My mother stood there wearing a beige linen dress, a wide-brimmed hat, and oversized sunglasses, her face a mixture of curiosity and caution. She walked slowly through the area, inspecting everything as if she were evaluating a real estate investment, not visiting her daughter. I wiped my hands and gave a polite smile. I thought you were too busy, Mom, I said. Her tone was airy, almost rehearsed. I just wanted to see this serious job you keep talking about. She stopped in front of the large wooden sign that read, "The Lot by Ava," read my name out loud, then gave a small, dismissive hum. Quite creative, I suppose. If you want, your father and I could help you invest more, maybe turn this place into a chain. I smiled softly, but with a chill behind it. Help? How exactly? By taking my name off the papers? She froze for a moment. Why would you say that? I'm just trying to show some interest. I looked her straight in the eyes, though the sunlight reflecting off her sunglasses made it hard to see what she really felt. Thank you, I said evenly. But the lot already has an investor me. Just then, a silver SUV pulled up. The door opened, and Amelia stepped out, holding a latte, her voice bright and cheerful. Mom, I told you this place is super trendy now. Everyone's checking in here. Then she spotted me. Her expression flickered for a moment, something between surprise and discomfort, but she quickly regained her poise. Hey, sis, she said with a curved smile. Mom told me you've been doing pretty well, so we were thinking we could help you open a branch up north. You should share it, you know. Mom and Dad just want to help. The word share sent a cold ripple down my spine. I set the folder of documents down on the table and crossed my arms. Share? I repeated calmly. No one helped me when I begged for a $5,000 loan to fix my roof back then. Mom said it was unnecessary. Dad told me no one forced you to live in that rundown apartment. I looked at each of them in turn. And now that this place has value, you want to share? Sorry, but no one gets a single dime. The air went still. Amelia raised an eyebrow. You're overreacting. Family isn't your enemy. I let out a soft laugh. No, not enemies. Just spectators, the ones who sat in the front row when I fell, and now want to stand beside me on stage. Mom opened her mouth to speak, but her voice trembled slightly. Ava, don't talk like that. I'm just worried about you. Worried? I cut in, my tone calm, but firm. You only worry when I do something that embarrasses you. When I was struggling, you weren't there. She lowered her eyes, silent. Amelia stepped between us, forcing a small, uneasy smile. All right, let's not make this tense. Mom, let me talk to her alone. We walked to the back patio, where sunlight glinted off the hanging lights and polished wooden tables. Amelia spoke softly. I don't understand why you have to be so extreme. I just think if you collaborated, everyone could benefit. I didn't look at her. My eyes stayed on the string lights above us. Benefit? I said quietly. Have you ever once thought about whose benefit? When you got the villa and I got a parking lot, did anyone in this family think about sharing then? Amelia said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost too gentle. That was a long time ago. Old doesn't mean forgotten, I said slowly, each word landing like a drop of water hitting wood. You call it sharing. I call it stealing credit. Amelia pressed her lips together, anger flickering across her face before she turned away. You've really changed, you know. You used to be so gentle. No, I replied. I haven't changed, I just stopped staying silent. I walked back to the bar area where the staff were turning on the lights for the evening. The golden glow spread across the tables, warm, steady, grounding. Mom and Amelia stood there for a moment before leaving, their perfume lingering in the air, the sound of their heels clicking against the concrete fading behind them. I watched them go, not angry, not bitter. Just light. For the first time in my life, I said no without feeling guilty. For the first time, I understood that saying no isn't ingratitude, it's self-respect. I looked up at the wooden sign swaying gently in the breeze, The Lot by Ava, and it felt like a declaration. I had finally cut the cord that tied me to dependence. That night, I wrote in my journal, June 14th, today I said no, not to fight them, but to stand with myself. And I knew that was my first moment of freedom. A long-healed wound finally closed, and in that quiet space, I felt something new, peace. But I should have known they wouldn't stop there. For Amelia and Mom, every failure was a crack in the perfect image they'd built, and my success without them was the deepest crack of all. 3 weeks after that confrontation at the lot, the first signs of their counterattack began to appear. On a Monday morning, I opened my laptop to check new orders and saw a notification from Yelp. Several recent reviews have been flagged as potential spam. I frowned and clicked it open. The 5 newest reviews, all 1 star. Each one sounded eerily similar. The owner is rude, the staff careless, the food terrible. Don't support someone who doesn't respect her family. I sat still for a few seconds, staring at the words, doesn't respect her family. The phrase was painfully familiar, the exact tone my mother used whenever she wanted to wound me while pretending to be righteous. She'd always used family as a shield to hide the harm she caused. I exhaled slowly. Anger flickered through me, but reason rose faster. I'd learned not to react emotionally. If they wanted to drag me into the mud, I'd let them sink in it themselves. 3 days later, a city inspector showed up at the lot's gate. White shirt, clipboard in hand, polite but uneasy. Miss Ava Carter? We received an anonymous complaint alleging safety and permit violations on this property. I looked at him calmly. I'm guessing anonymous means not hard to guess, right? He gave a small, awkward chuckle. I'm not allowed to say, but it seems you already know. I walked him through the entire space, hand-washing stations, drainage systems, food safety certificates, building permits, inspection logs. Everything was spotless and up to code. He nodded repeatedly, jotting notes as we went. When he finished, he smiled. Actually, my wife and I have eaten here before. The tacos were great. Don't let silly rumors get to you. I thanked him with a smile, but the fire inside me still burned. Not out of fear, but conviction. Because I knew if I stayed silent, they'd think they'd won. That night, after the food park went dark, I sat alone under the swaying string lights. I thought back to when I was 18 when they handed me that piece of land and laughed. They had wanted to make me a joke. But from that joke, I had built something they could never buy, respect. And right then, I knew it was time to tell the real story. My way. The next morning, I called the Austin Chronicle, the local paper known for covering small businesses around the city. I told the editor, I have a story that might make your readers see the phrase abandoned land differently. He sounded intrigued. That does sound interesting. What's the story? I replied, it's about a girl whose parents gave her a parking lot as a joke, and how she turned it into an empire. 2 days later, a journalist named Rachel Kim arrived at the lot with a photographer. I told her everything without hiding or softening the truth. The humiliation, the mockery, even the fake reviews. Rachel took notes quietly, then looked up and said, "This isn't just a business story. It's a story about resilience. I'm going to title it, The Woman Who Built a Business from a Parking Lot Her Parents Gave Her as a Joke." I nodded. That sounds about right. The article hit the front page of the local heroes section a week later, and it spread like wildfire. People shared it, commented, tagged me in thousands of posts. TikTok filled with videos showing me standing in front of the lot, with captions like, "From joke to dream." Strangers came up to me, shook my hand, told me my story gave them courage to start over. One middle-aged woman said, "My ex-husband left me with debt and a rusted old warehouse. I'm going to turn it into a pottery studio now." I smiled, my eyes stinging softly. When the article hit 1 million views, my mother called. I stared at her name on the screen, my hand frozen. After a few seconds, I answered. "Ava," she began, her tone calm but tightly restrained. "That article, it's making people misunderstand our family. Do you know people are talking badly about me?" I replied softly, "No, they're just hearing the truth." Her voice snapped, sharp and brittle. "You're hurting your parents." I kept my voice steady. "No, I'm just telling what happened. If that hurts you, maybe the hurt was there long before I spoke it." Then I hung up. For the first time, my hand didn't shake. After the article, business at the lot doubled. Lines stretched down the block, live music played every weekend, and the revenue was enough to pay off every loan and start plans for a second location. But more importantly, I found something I'd never had growing up: the faith of others. Strangers emailed me, thanking me, saying my story made them want to rise again after failure. I read every word and realized they were the family I had chosen. One late night, sitting alone on the balcony, I watched the crowds below. The wind brushed through my hair, the lights reflected off my half-finished glass of beer, and I let out a quiet laugh. "They thought they buried me," I murmured. But they didn't know how deep my roots had already grown. From the cracked cement of that abandoned lot, I had grown like a cactus, rough, resilient, and still blooming. I tilted my head up toward the sky. The same stars from years ago were still there. But this time, I didn't see them as a place to sleep under the stars. I saw them as hundreds of tiny lights reflecting from the lot itself, lights I had built with my own hands, lights no one could ever put out, not even if they chose to turn against me completely. It was a special Saturday night, the second anniversary of The Lot by Ava. I stood on the second-floor balcony overlooking the outdoor stage, watching hundreds of people cheer below. The lights flickered in rhythm with the acoustic music, and the air was thick with the scent of food and laughter. I wasn't someone who often felt proud of myself, but that night, I allowed it. I exhaled softly, a quiet sigh of relief. I had done it from a parking lot once given to me as a joke. I had built one of Austin's most beloved gathering places. And, just as I thought peace had finally settled in, chaos erupted at the gate. A staff member rushed up to me, whispering, "Ava, there's a woman causing a scene at the entrance. She says she's your sister." Before I could respond, I saw her Amelia emerging from the crowd. The familiar blonde hair, the red high heels, the unsteady steps across the concrete. Her off-shoulder silk dress was wrinkled, mascara streaking down her cheeks, and a half-finished glass of wine still in her hand. Behind her, my mother followed, her face drawn and anxious. I didn't need to guess. This wasn't going to end quietly. Amelia stumbled forward, her voice sharp and trembling with a mix of alcohol and long-held resentment. "Oh, look who it is, the queen of the parking lot." A few people in the crowd started pulling out their phones, recording. I descended the steps slowly, keeping my voice calm. "Amelia, you should go home. This isn't the place for that." She let out a shrill laugh that cut through the music. "A joke? The whole life of yours is a joke, Ava. You think you're better than me? You're just that greasy little mechanic who used to fix bikes in Grandpa's garage." I could feel hundreds of eyes on me. The music faded, replaced by an uneasy hush that spread across the crowd. Amelia staggered closer, raising her glass, her voice sharp and slurred. "All of this," she said, waving her arm around, "is just luck. Don't think success changes what you are. My mother reached out to grab her wrist. Amelia, stop it, you're making a scene. But Amelia yanked her hand free, wine splattering onto Mom's beige dress. No, you've always taken her side. And now what? Now she's the famous one, and I'm just the lazy twin. The jealousy in her eyes was unmistakable. I'd seen it before, when we were children, but now it had taken shape in the rawness of alcohol and desperation. I took a step closer, my voice calm but steady. You're drunk, Amelia. Go home. I'll call you a car. Light. Instead of backing away, she raised her glass again, her voice trembling. You think you can lecture me now? And then everything moved in slow motion. She threw the glass. The deep red liquid arced through the air, bursting in the glow of the lights. The glass hit the ground, shattering into hundreds of sharp, glittering fragments. Wine splashed across my shirt, cold and sticky against my skin. The entire space went silent. Somewhere, someone whispered, "Oh my God," and then even that stopped. I stood perfectly still, hearing nothing but the slow, heavy thud of my own heartbeat. 2 security guards rushed forward, grabbing Amelia by the arms. My mother screamed, "Stop, don't touch her." But Amelia struggled, thrashing, her voice cracking with rage. "Let me go, I'm not done with her yet." I didn't move. My eyes stayed locked on hers. When I finally spoke, my voice was low, not raised, not trembling. Actions have consequences, Amelia. Phones started rising one by one, flashes flickering through the tense air. People were recording. Someone in the crowd called the police. I saw it in Amelia's eyes, the brief flicker of fear, then regret, but it was already too late. When the officers arrived, she was still shouting, her voice hoarse with panic. This is her fault. She's always wanted to be better than me. My mother was crying, pleading. Ava, please don't do this. She just lost control. Ekabra. I shook my head slowly. Losing control is still a choice. I learned that from you. The officers escorted Amelia through the crowd as she thrashed and yelled, "You'll regret this, Ava, you'll." Her words were swallowed by the wail of the sirens. Mom tried to run after her, but a staff member stopped her gently. I stood still, the wine dripping down my wrist, cold, sharp, and deliberate. I didn't wipe it away. I wanted to remember exactly how it felt, chilling, painful, but clear. When they left, the crowd began to disperse. The music started up again, but the laughter didn't return. One of my staff members approached me, his voice shaking. "Are you okay?" I smiled faintly, steady. "I'm fine. Just clean up the glass and turn the lights back on." Then I walked into the office, changed my shirt, and went back to work as if nothing had happened. But later that night, sitting alone in the empty food park, I knew something had broken completely, not just in our family, but in how I saw them. I didn't feel heavy anymore. I felt light, almost free. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. A customer had filmed the entire scene, Amelia's yelling, the thrown wine, everything. The headline spreading online read, "Golden Twin Meltdown at Austin's Famous Food Park." It hit millions of views, thousands of comments. Someone wrote, "I used to think that story in the paper was exaggerated, but now I believe it. The older sister is pure strength." Another person commented, "From now on, I'm only eating at the Lot by Ava. It's not just a food park, it's a symbol of standing up for yourself." When I read those comments, there was no sadness left, only stillness. They had destroyed their own image without me lifting a finger. All I had to do was stand still and let them fall. Mom texted me. "Are you happy now? Your sister is being humiliated everywhere. This family has lost its dignity because of you." I read the message, set the phone down, and looked out the window where the first rays of sunrise glowed against the sign that read "The Lot by Ava." I whispered quietly, not sending the words, just saying them to myself. "No, Mom. The family lost face because of the choices they made." That night, after closing, I walked through the empty food park. On the concrete floor, faint stains of dried wine remained, and small shards of glass glimmered beneath the lights. I bent down, picked up one piece, and watched it catch the reflection. It was small, sharp, but beautiful, just like the scars I carried. I slipped it into my pocket and smiled. From that night on, I knew I no longer feared anyone in my family. Because finally, they had revealed who they truly were, and all I had to do was keep walking forward, on the same ground they once called worthless. From here, there was nowhere to go but up. Months passed after Amelia's arrest, months filled with flashing lights, social media noise, and silence that followed. I thought I'd never hear their names again. But life, as always, has its way of circling back. When winter swept through Austin, bringing rain and cold air, I received a strange email. The subject line was simple: "We need to talk." The sender, my father. I read it, then closed it, but just a few weeks later, they came in person. That afternoon, the sky was gray and heavy with cold. I was checking inventory in the storage shed when I heard a car pull up at the gate. An old SUV, its paint chipped and faded. My father stepped out first. He looked at least 10 years older. My mother followed, wrapped in a worn sweater, her face drawn tight with tension. I didn't move to greet them like I once would have. I just waited as they walked closer. "Ava," my father said, his voice rough. "We need to talk." I nodded and led them into the small container office where I worked. The air inside felt dense. My father looked around, taking in the paperwork, the expansion plans, the small model of times the lot. Asterisk. He sighed. "You've done well. We never imagined this place would grow like it has." I stayed silent. I'd learned that their compliments were usually the soft prelude to a request. And, just as expected, a few seconds later, my mother spoke. "Ava, your father has lost almost everything. The company went under, investors pulled out. The house in Dallas was taken by the bank, and Amelia." She paused, her voice trembling. "The villa on Lake Travis has been repossessed. She has nothing left." I stood still, feeling as though I were watching an old film, only this time I wasn't the one playing the tragic role. Mom leaned forward, her tone almost pleading. "Our family needs help. Can you lend us some money? Just until we get back on our feet. Family helps each other, you know that." I gave a small, quiet smile. "Family helps each other," I repeated, my voice calm. "That sounds familiar, but tell me, when I needed $5,000 to fix my roof, where was family then?" My father's jaw tightened. "Don't say that. Things were different back then, but now." He drew a deep breath. "Now you can help. Just give your parents a chance to start over." I listened as they spoke about the debts, about Amelia moving back into a cramped rented apartment, about old friends turning their backs. My mother's voice broke when she said, "All my life I only wanted what's best for you. I never imagined it would end like this." I didn't interrupt. I only watched the coffee go cold on the table. When they fell silent, I stood, opened a drawer, and took out a thick file. "I know about the Lake Travis villa," I said slowly. "I watched the bank listing the moment it appeared. And a few weeks ago." I slid the top paper across the desk. "I bought it." They both looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. My father stammered. You bought it?" I nodded. "With cash. No loans, no mortgages. 5 years ago, that house wasn't meant for me. Now it is, and if you want to stay, you'll pay rent. Monthly." The room froze. My mother looked at me as if I'd slapped her. "Ava, you can't speak to your parents like this," she said, voice trembling with a mix of anger and shame. I answered, gentle but firm. "You're right. But you shouldn't have treated your daughter that way 5 years ago either." I pushed the lease contract toward them. "I'm not evicting anyone, I'm only being fair. You taught me to value property, didn't you? I'm simply applying that lesson." My father sat stunned, eyes unfocused. He looked at the contract, then at me, and asked quietly, "How much?" I read each word clearly. $2,500 a month. 6-month contract. After that, if you want to stay, I'll reconsider. Rent is at market rate, even below market. My mother burst into tears. "You're getting revenge." I shook my head. No, I'm putting everything back where it belongs. A one, they went silent. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. Finally, my father reached into his pocket, pulled out a pen, and with a trembling hand, signed his name. The ink bled faintly into the paper. He slid the pen to my mother. She hesitated, looking at me through her tears. "Do you really have no compassion left, Ava?" she whispered. My voice came out soft, almost like a breath. "I do. But compassion doesn't feed self-respect." She signed. I folded the contract neatly, placed it into the folder, and stood. "I'll have the keys sent over this week. If you need anything, contact the property manager. There's no need to call me." They sat there, two figures who had once embodied authority and certainty in my childhood, now just shadows fading into gray. I didn't feel triumph nor sadness, only an odd, quiet emptiness. When they finally left, I stepped outside and watched the old SUV pull out of the lot. The sky was overcast, but a weak beam of light still touched the pavement, the same ground where everything had once begun. That night, back in my apartment, I opened my old notebook and wrote, "Today, I closed 5 years of emotional debt. I didn't win over anyone. I just reclaimed my place." I looked out the window, where the lights of the lot still glowed brightly, reflecting against the glass. Inside me, there was no anger, no fear, just calm. Maybe that was the real victory. Because sometimes, revenge isn't about making others suffer. It's about standing still, watching them face the cost of their own choices while you keep living, and living well. The next morning, Austin was draped in a soft veil of fog. I stood on the roof of the container office, overlooking all of the lot. The early wind carried the smell of freshly roasted coffee from a food truck below, blending with the faint sound of a guitar being tuned. The sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon, casting a gentle golden hue across everything. Below, a few employees were unlocking the gates, turning on the string lights that lined the fence, the same lights I had hung years ago with trembling hands when I was just a girl everyone laughed at. Now, they shone every morning as a quiet reminder. Even from darkness, light can bloom if you're patient enough to wait for dawn. I leaned against the railing and took a deep breath. The air carried the scent of metal, coffee, and a kind of peace I once thought I would never have. In my head, my own voice echoed slow, clear, like a quiet farewell. They gave me a piece of barren land, thinking I'd sleep under the stars. They were right, I did sleep under the stars, but only to dream bigger than they ever dared. I don't need a mansion, I don't need praise, all I need is peace within myself. I thought of Amelia, of my parents, not with anger anymore, but with understanding. Everyone lives under the shadow of their own fears and their hunger for validation. They never truly hated me, they simply didn't know how to love me the right way. And maybe real maturity isn't about proving you're better, it's about being strong enough to stop proving anything at all. From my pocket, I pulled out a folded sheet of paper, a small project I'd been nurturing for months. The Under the Stars Foundation. A scholarship fund for young women who want to build from nothing, for those no one believes in, just as no one once believed in me. I want them to see themselves beneath the night sky, not in loneliness, but in hope. The morning drifted on, sunlight spilling over the rooftops of the food trucks, glinting off the wooden sign carved with my name. I walked down, across the lot that had once been cracked and empty, now paved and alive with laughter and music. Before leaving the office, I turned off the final switch. The lights dimmed one by one, but inside me, another kind of light kept burning, steady, quiet, eternal. I turned back and looked at the lot glowing in the morning haze. It was no longer the abandoned space of my past, but proof that pain can become seed. I smiled softly. Above me, the last few stars lingered in the fading dawn like dreams that refused to die. And then, as if written across the closing frame of my life, one simple line appeared, gentle, but holding everything I'd learned. Sometimes, the worst gift becomes the beginning of the best life.